What if I told you that some of the men sworn to protect the Constitution actually burned it to the ground? That a president meant to lead a nation instead drove it straight off a cliff? We're not talking about unpopular policies or bad speeches. We're talking about men who crashed economies, ignored genocide, and watched their own country rip itself apart while doing absolutely nothing. These are the worst presidents in American history, and their failures are so catastrophic you'll wonder how we survive them at all. Let's start with a man most Americans couldn't pick out of a lineup, Franklin Pierce. Now Pierce looked like a movie star. Handsome, charming, the kind of guy you'd trust to sell you a used car. But behind that pretty face was a president who poured gasoline on the fire that would become the Civil War. In 1854, Pierce signed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which basically said new territories could vote on whether to allow slavery. Sounds democratic, right? Wrong. What actually happened was both pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces flooded Kansas with guns, torches, and enough rage to light up the entire Midwest. The territory erupted into 5 years of murder and chaos that historians literally named Bleeding Kansas. And what did Pierce do while Americans slaughtered each other? He backed the pro-slavery side that came to power through fraud and violence. He sent federal troops not to stop the bloodshed, but to protect an illegitimate government. Before we continue, please like and subscribe. Your support encourages us to keep producing videos like these. Pierce didn't just fail to prevent the Civil War. He accelerated it. He took a country already cracking at the seams and stomped on it until it shattered. But Pierce looks like a genius compared to James Buchanan, the man who watched the nation collapse and decided to take a nap. When Buchanan took office in 1857, slavery was tearing America apart. He had one job: lead the country. Instead, he threw up his hands and let the Supreme Court handle it. That brilliant move gave us the Dred Scott decision, one of the most shameful rulings in American history, declaring that black Americans could never be citizens. Buchanan thought this would settle the debate forever. Instead, it lit a powder keg. 3 years later, Abraham Lincoln won the presidency, and the South panicked. States started seceding before Lincoln even took office. And Buchanan, still in the White House, said something truly incredible. He admitted secession was illegal, but claimed the federal government couldn't do anything to stop it. Read that again. The President of the United States watched 7 states leave the Union, watched federal forts get seized, watched his country disintegrate, and shrugged. By the time he handed the keys to Lincoln, America was already free-falling into the bloodiest war in its history. Buchanan didn't cause the Civil War, but he absolutely could have prevented it. Instead, he became the poster child for cowardice in the Oval Office. His legacy isn't a scandal or a bad law. His legacy is choosing to do nothing when everything was on fire. Now, if Buchanan failed by doing nothing, Andrew Johnson failed by doing way too much of the wrong thing. When Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in 1865, America desperately needed someone to heal the wounds of war. Instead, we got a former slaveholder from Tennessee who thought the newly freed black Americans didn't deserve basic human rights. Johnson vetoed the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which would have granted citizenship and equal protection to formerly enslaved people. Congress overrode him and passed the 14th Amendment anyway. But Johnson wasn't done. He issued mass pardons to tens of thousands of Confederates, the same people who had just waged war against the United States. In most countries, that's called treason. You don't get a second chance. But Johnson let them walk free, let them reclaim power in the South, and set the stage for Jim Crow, the Ku Klux Klan, and a century of racial terror. Congress was so furious they impeached him, the first presidential impeachment in American history. He survived by a single vote. One vote saved a man who had basically undone everything the Civil War was fought for. Fast forward a few decades to Herbert Hoover, the man who promised prosperity and delivered catastrophe. Hoover came into office with a resume that would make anyone jealous. Self-made millionaire, humanitarian hero, the guy who fed starving Europeans after World War I. Americans thought he was going to lead them into a golden age. Then the stock market crashed, and Hoover completely froze. As banks collapsed and unemployment hit 25%, Hoover refused to act. He believed government intervention would make things worse. So he sat back and waited for the free market to fix itself. Spoiler, it didn't. Families lost everything. Bread lines stretched for blocks. Homeless encampments called Hoovervilles popped up across the country, named after the president who abandoned them. But the real gut punch came in 1932 when 15,000 World War I veterans marched on Washington demanding early payment of bonuses they'd been promised. These were men who had fought for their country, now desperate and starving. Hoover's response? He sent the army. General Douglas MacArthur rolled in with tanks, tear gas, and bayonets to clear out American veterans. When photographs of soldiers attacking heroes hit newspapers across the nation, Hoover's legacy was sealed, not as a leader, as a monster who turned the military against his own people. And then there is Warren G. Harding, who might be the most honest, terrible president we've ever had because at least he knew he was awful. Harding once admitted, "I am not fit for this office and should never have been here." He was absolutely right. Harding ran on returning America to normalcy after World War I. What he actually delivered was the most corrupt administration in American history. Before we continue, please like and subscribe. Your support encourages us to keep producing videos like these. Harding packed his cabinet with the Ohio Gang, a crew of poker buddies, drinking partners, and political cronies who treated the federal government like their personal piggy bank. The Teapot Dome scandal saw his Secretary of the Interior secretly lease federal oil reserves to private companies in exchange for bribes. His Veterans Bureau director embezzled millions meant for wounded soldiers, the same men who had just sacrificed everything in the trenches of France. His Attorney General allegedly took kickbacks while Prohibition-era criminals ran wild. And while all of this was happening, Harding spent his days golfing, gambling, and drinking, which was illegal during Prohibition, by the way. He had multiple affairs in the White House. The man treated the presidency like a vacation from responsibility. Harding died of a heart attack in 1923 before the full scope of his corruption was exposed. Some historians believe the stress of knowing what was about to come out killed him. Either way, his administration didn't just damage trust in government. It shattered it completely. We're still living with that skepticism today. But here's what makes all of this matter. These weren't faceless bureaucrats or minor officials. These were the most powerful men on earth at the time, entrusted with the fate of millions. And they failed spectacularly. Buchanan's cowardice led to 600,000 dead Americans in the Civil War. Johnson's racism poisoned the nation for generations. Hoover's inaction destroyed countless lives during the Depression. Harding's corruption proved that even the highest office could be bought and sold. The presidency isn't just a job, it's a test of character. And these men prove that power doesn't reveal who you are. It amplifies it. Weak men become weaker. Corrupt men become more corrupt. And the people who pay the price are never the ones sitting in the Oval Office. What separates a great president from a disaster isn't intelligence or charm or political skill. It's the willingness to act when action is hard, to choose principle over convenience, to serve the country instead of yourself. These men had every resource, every advantage, every opportunity to do the right thing. And they chose not to. So the next time you think about what makes someone worthy of leading a nation, remember these faces. Remember Buchanan watching his country burn. Remember Johnson betraying the men who fought to end slavery. Remember Hoover sending tanks against veterans. Remember Harding drinking while his friends robbed the treasury. The worst presidents in American history aren't just embarrassing footnotes. They're warnings. And if we forget their lessons, we're doomed to repeat their failures. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Every single one of these men was elected. Voters looked at Pierce, Buchanan, Johnson, Hoover, and Harding and said, "Yeah, that's our guy." They chose charm over character. They chose comfort over courage. They chose the easy answer over the hard truth. And millions paid the price. So before you judge these presidents too harshly, ask yourself, would you have seen through them? Would you have recognized the coward, the racist, the fraud? Because the next worst president in American history hasn't happened yet. And the only thing standing between them and the Oval Office is you. History doesn't remember presidents for their promises. It remembers them for their choices. And the men we just talked about, they had every chance to choose differently. Buchanan could have acted. Johnson could have healed. Hoover could have helped. Harding could have led, but they did not, and we will not forget.